Well, welcome to week 4, module 3, expanding and communicating your leadership platform. What do you really stand for? What are the basic values that you bring into your role as an emerging leader? What are the things that are most important to communicate to other people as you establish and expand your sphere of influence? The more I think, the more I get confused. In preparation for this week, you've read chapter 4, and I've asked you to reread chapter 3. We're going to focus on that this week. You've added Waters pages 26 to 45 for your reading on focus. You've posted your professional experience platform blog. That was post 3, which was basically your resume and narrative form. The purpose of this week is to summarize and communicate in writing and in person your leadership style and your non-negotiables. Posting in writing your leadership style is post 4, and posting in writing your non-negotiables is post 5. So for this week, we'll be working on 2 posts rather than the typical 1 post we've done up till now. You're going to draft your leadership style summary and complete your post in about 250 words on your style and about 250 words on your non-negotiables. We're going to talk about both of those posts today. So far in communicating your platform, you've talked about what you believe. You've shared, in post 1, you've shared a story from your personal experience about why those beliefs about educating kids and the preparatory nature of their education is important to you. Where does that come from? You've shared your professional experience this past week, the experiences you've had as an educator that lead you to this current communication of your leadership platform as you establish and expand your sphere of influence. And now we're going to add to that what your leadership style is and what your non-negotiables are. As your platform is developing, we talked about this last week, I continue to want to give you this flow of how these posts are coming together to something succinct. And that is, we've begun post 1 with your beliefs, your core values about educating children. We've gone to your personal story, blog post 2, which was what part of your personal story is the source of those core beliefs about educating children. You've summarized your professional experience this past week, platform blog post 3. The statement about your beliefs was your core value, and the statement about your personal story was your authenticity, and the statement about your professional experience this past week establishes your credibility that you are an experienced educator. This is not just philosophical thought or things you've gotten from books, but you establish your credibility as a way I'm experiencing every day my opportunity to express my beliefs and to expand and enhance the importance of my story, my values, my authenticity, my credibility. As we now get prepared to present your leadership style in blog post 4 and your non-negotiables in blog post 5, your style is an expression of your interpersonal vision, how you get along with other people, how you work with other people. As a leader, your decision-making process and how you involve other people. What is their role in the decisions that are made within your scope of authority? And finally, your non-negotiables are a statement of your integrity. What are the things that you just are bottom lines for you, are your lines in the sand? We'll talk about each. So now we get into the discussion about, it's a matter of style. What's yours? This is the time we start talking about how you communicate in writing and verbally your process of government under your authority. What is the process you use to make decisions? What is the process you use to act upon others or with others? What is your top-down philosophy regarding the use of authority and bureaucracy? How do you make decisions? What voices do you give to other people? What ears do you provide for other people's voices? These are conversations about personal style. Do I want to work with you under your tutelage as a leader? One thing that will help you start thinking about this was in Green's chapter 3, And he begins with a very succinct view of the foundation for effective leadership, the foundation for your leadership style. He talked about 4 dimensions of effective leadership: understanding self and others, understanding the complexity of the organization, building bridges through relationships, and engaging in best practices. Your style emanates from your basic understanding and belief of these things. So I urge you to go back and read each of them carefully, read this chapter carefully again. Understanding self and others is about your own core beliefs and values and how they influence others. First, how they influence yourself, habits 1 through 3, and then how they involve others, habits 4 through 6. Leaders' behavior influences the others, and others' behavior influences a leader. So what is the relationship between your influence on the people you work with, on others, and what is their influence, their behavior's influence on how you act and react? This is all part of understanding self and others, the foundational aspects of effective leadership. And finally, how do you really identify and use the personal strengths of the other people you work with to make their contribution part of the overall, advancing the overall mission of the organization, of the school, and of the goals of the school? Second aspect of Green's 4 steps to effective leadership is understanding the complexity of the organization. This is about understanding the culture, understanding how the culture, the elements of the culture is made up, in other words, perhaps the pillars, and how to respect individual needs while we look at the overall needs of the organization. That balance we talked about last week between relationships and tasks and demands at hand. How do the ability to support individuals' needs match with and get aligned with and get supported while we keep in mind the overall needs of the organization. The third area, building bridges through relationships, is how do we achieve our members accepting policies and practices based on trust rather than based on demands or compliance? And how do we develop mutual relationships with each other, mutual respect with each other to create a more positive work environment? Again, another culture building activity. And how does our environment, the processes we use, how are they built on equity and fairness so there's a commitment on everybody's behalf to work towards the organizational achievement, to work to the achievement of the organization? And finally, focus, 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 which was what Waters' reading was this week. How do we make sure that our leadership doesn't lose sight of what we're here to do is lead everybody in the direction where we're engaging in the best practices for the organization and the best leadership practices? What are the results, what are the behaviors we use, the programs we put in place, the focus we create in our leadership to make sure we're using the most effective, research-based and promising practices possible? If we don't do that, we'll never be a high-performing school. So the first cut at thinking about leadership style is a pretty broad one as you go through Green's chapter. There's kind of 4 things that kind of identify the first statement of a leader. Are you authoritative? Are you democratic? Are you paternalistic? Are you laissez-faire? And you should have a good understanding what each of those 4 aspects of leaders is and which one you tend to gravitate to. Because the second cut is people always say it depends. I'm a situational leader. Sometimes I'm democratic, and sometimes I'm authoritative, and sometimes I lay back and watch the action happen because I'm more laissez-faire. Sometimes I tend to be more paternalistic and maternalistic in my style, depending on the situation. I'm situational. But even a situational leader operates from one of these 4 frameworks. Which one best defines you? Which one, under most circumstances, would you most likely reside to being, most want to be identified as, and work the hardest to use to form the basis for most of your leadership style? If you were able to operate in quadrant 2 of putting first things first, urgent things that aren't important, which of these 4 areas would you tend to find yourself in? And as things become urgent and important, which style tends to define your leadership and how you can manage that within the aspects of purposeful community and focus. The next cut then is, if you really examine the standards, the CAPE standards and the standards, the ISLEC standards in the Green Book, you'll see that current thinking is most leadership in schools emanates from a democratic leader. If yours doesn't, you really need to re-examine that. If your behavior doesn't, but your philosophy does, you need to re-examine your behavior. Think proactively, start with the end in mind, putting first things first to be more democratic. But once you decide that your basic philosophy within your leadership or your situational leadership stems from a democratic platform, then you have other decisions to make. If you find that your leadership style doesn't emanate from a desire to be a democratic leader, then you're going to have to re-examine your best fit in schools as it relates to standards. We'll need a lot of coaching regarding this and mentoring regarding this, depending on what your basic tendencies are, past history is. Most of you have discovered this as you worked on your own governance within your own classrooms or your own sphere of influence. But as you move to become a more democratic leader within the spirit of the professional standards for administrators and educational leaders, you'll find that now you have to decide which are the labels for democratic leadership best define you. And on pages 72 to 73, there are 5 types of leadership styles. We all seem to say, well, I'm that and I'm that, but if you listed them, if you rank ordered them, which one best defines you? And there's no right answer. Are you a servant leader? Are you a transformational leader? Is your leadership based on moral dimensions of leadership? Are you a distributive leader? Are you synergistic? Do you apply synergistic leadership theory? Which label or of these labels best define what other people can assume your leadership decisions are going to be based from, are going to emanate from? So as you start to find your own leadership style, what are the aspects of leadership that you're looking at? What are the habits of leadership that you're working on developing? What type of leader are you? And within that type of leader, which label or labels define you? And why? You can't just use these terms. You have to provide them in a context where people understand you know what they mean. You have a vision for what that looks like in you. You have a vision for what you expect in yourself as this type of leader. And you have a vision for what other people should expect in you if they're allowing you or sending you to a sphere of influence where you're going to have this type of leadership with them. So think about this long and hard. And this is one of those posts that you're going to build on and work on and create. So you're creating a context with, if you were going through a job interview and you describe your leadership style, people would say, I'd like to work with that person. That's the type of person that should lead this school. Or they're using words, I have no idea what they mean. Or this isn't a good match for us. That's your post. Your second post is on your non-negotiables of leadership. You gave your general beliefs about educating children and the importance of that in post 1. You talked about your story in post 2. You talked about how you built this in your professional resume in post 3. You've now talked about your leadership style and things that are important to you in terms of how you make decisions, the type of government that gets formed under your leadership. Now, what are your lines in the sand? What things will and won't you tolerate in a school? What are the expectations every member of the school should have for you, non-negotiably? And as a result, what are the expectations you have for every other member of building a powerful school? What are the 3 things that you could say are the non-negotiables you should expect about me, and in turn I will expect about you? And if these things aren't happening, if I'm not demonstrating these things, call me on it. Have a critical conversation with me on it. And if I don't see these things happening with my staff or in you, if you're not meeting these expectations, I'm going to have that critical conversation with you. These are not things I'm going to ignore. This is the source of my integrity. This is what you can expect of me. These are things that I'm willing to put my job on the line about, or yours. So where are they? That's post 5. The neat thing about completing these posts is at this point in time, these 5 posts make up your entire introduction to your platform. We'll have completed this next week, and we can get into some of the subsections that provide a little more content-related information and not solely your visionary and philosophic information. So this is a great point in the development of your platform. You're finally going to get to the point where you can look at all 5 of these pieces and put them together as an introductory statement to your leadership platform. They're all the sort of questions you'd want to introduce yourself to be prepared for if you were interviewing for a position of leadership. They're the type of things you'd want to review if you were introducing yourself to your staff for the first time, to a task force for the first time that you're leading, to a group of parents that are trusting their children to you. They're an important thing to be able to write and refer back to as your concept of leadership develops, as your sphere of influence grows, as you reconsider how you are changing as a professional and as a leader. And most importantly, every one of these items are things you should be able to comfortably articulate with others, whether you have a 30-second ride in an elevator with your superintendent, whether you have to answer a call from a teacher, or whether you're interviewing for a job. This is your introduction to your leadership platform. I hope you're enjoying it. You're learning a lot about yourself. You're changing as a result of writing it. I know the non-negotiables should put you in a position of saying, yeah, there are things that are so important to me. The expectation is so high that you should expect of me and I should expect of you. If these aren't happening, we're going to call each other on it. Next week, green, at this point in time, there are no more further assignments in the green book. Read at your discretion. Go back and look at some of the case studies. There are things you can share with your colleagues. You can think about yourself. There are really great chapters that might really be of interest to you now or in the future. Use chapter 3 as you write your blog post 4, but at this point in time forward, the rest of the class, you're reading green at your own discretion. A lot of you, hopefully, have found green to be a great reference to your own leadership, thinking, and development. Same is true of waters. We've gone through most of waters now. To go back and think about it, to balancing out your leadership, to look at the stress between first order and second order change, to look at purposeful community as it relates to some of the aspects of building your own school culture. At this point in time, referring back to waters is at your own discretion as well. There are no further assigned readings in it. Your assignments for next week, as we said, leadership style blog post 3, non-negotiables blog post 4, practice verbalizing blog post 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Have a great week. Lead.